This is Hospitality 1-to-1, conversations on the industry. Here's your host, Chris Bennis.
Scott, thank you so much for joining us. I know you've got quite a hectic day. I appreciate your time today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Great to talk to you. So I wanted to first kind of get started off here. You're a regional vice president with Two Roads Hospitality. Give me an idea. First of all, how did you get there? Tell me your story.
Sure. I've been with Two Roads Hospitality it hasn't been Two Roads for as long as I've been through it. So I'm going to start in the beginning. I started in business school and I wanted to run a business. I wasn't sure what type of business I wanted to run. And while I was in business school, I was working in hospitality as I had been for most of my youth. So I was waiting on tables earlier. I was bussing I was doing dishes, those types of things. And when I was in college, I started working for a banquet facility that was doing 2-3 weddings a day. It was a huge box. You'd start with basically a blank canvas. And you'd create this incredible experience for a bride who was going to remember it for the rest of her life, and her groom and the guests as well. And you would create, it was theater to me, honestly. It was an empty screen. You fill it with amazing details. People have great experiences, and then they leave, and you break it down and do it again in a different way for a whole new audience. And that was magical to me. And I got bit by the bug right there. And I was like, I want to have something to do with this. And then I decided to transfer from business school into a hospitality-focused school and focus on hotels and restaurants. Initially, I thought I wanted to do restaurants, and I figured I would open my own restaurant within 5 years. I remember during one of my interviews after college, they said, "Oh, he's the guy with the 5-year plan." So I wanted to learn from other people in terms of the mistakes that you would make or not make, and go into the restaurant business per se. I started in the casino business in the food and beverage outlets. I worked in Atlantic City for about 5 years, my way through the food and beverage outlets, and then was recruited into the hotel side of the casino business. So that's when I made my transformation. And from that point forward, I was always a hybrid of hotel and restaurant experience for the rest of my career.
So how do you, when you look at, because you've had the unique privilege of working both sides, what do you think is the biggest difference? Because both are hospitality driven, but aside from the obvious, one's food, one's not, what do you think are the biggest differences between the restaurant or F&B side of things as opposed to the hotel side of things?
In the food and beverage industry, if you don't go independent and start opening a chain of your own restaurants and you work your way through the system, I think there's fewer opportunities to get higher in the food and beverage aspect of hospitality than there is in a hotel, and that's just my opinion. If you're a director of food and beverage, you can do a big box in Las Vegas or in Atlantic City or in New York and get to a pretty pinnacle level. But outside of those markets, you have to go into a regional role, and there's only one of those per company. A higher regional role, vice president levels, things of that nature.
Now, when it comes to you being in the industry. You've had multiple roles, have seen things change over time. Give me an idea, in your opinion, how has the industry changed since you came on board?
Well, the world's changed. I've been doing this for a while. Technology is probably the biggest impact in terms of what the guest experience is, at least within the last 10, 15 years. Also, the brands diversity has been pretty significant. Back in the beginning, it was only a couple brands out there. Most of those were motel type. Then they started prototyping consistency with Marriott and Hilton and Holiday Inn. And now it's diversity. Now it's lifestyle. So I would say, number one is the brands. Number two is the information technology type experience that guests are having.
That's a very valid point. Now, when it comes to, I guess, from a hotel standpoint here, where do you see the hotel industry going in the next 5, next 10 years?
That's interesting because immediately right now, and actually the last 4 years or so, it's been lifestyle driven. People were trying to get away from the same old and have a diverse local experience. Originally, I think the hospitality industry was, because there was so much inconsistency from hotel to hotel and brand to brand, they said, we just want a guest to know if they stay at brand X, they know what they're going to get. and they can stay at brand X anywhere, and it's going to be consistent, and it's going to be good, and it's going to be safe, and it's going to be clean. Now it's people don't want that. They want to know if they stay in a hotel in New York, they want to feel like they're in New York City. If they stay in a hotel in LA, same thing. So immediately right now, that's where lifestyle is coming from. It's from a diverse experience that's not cookie cutter, that's unique. Moving forward, I think the shared space concepts are pretty interesting. There's companies out there that are doing those either from an upscale hostel version or into, I don't want to name brands because they're competitors, but into shared space concepts as well. Micro lifestyle is pretty hot right now and exploding everywhere. So that will continue. That's because the builders can get more square foot, more room keys within a square footage facility, so they can have a better RevPAR. So that's something that's happening a lot. Those are all some of the trends right now.
Now, you brought up an interesting point. You're talking about how we've gone from the cookie cutter to more of the lifestyle, and if you're in New York, you want to feel like you're in New York, which makes sense. And that works well for the boutique hotels, the independent properties, those that are already designed to have their own DNA. But how do you think this is going to affect the branded hotels, the ones that since time? I mean, I use the example of you could stay at, in many cases, a Fairfield Inn or a Hampton Inn or one of those places. You could stand in the middle of a hallway of one of those hotels and you couldn't tell what city you're in. How do these hotels begin to change over time because that need for that unique DNA?
That's an interesting question that I think about quite a bit and have a lot of discussions about. The brand hotels that are trying to get into the lifestyle space are doing it through the design element, which is critical. Design is a big piece of it. The piece that I think is more challenging for them is that that DNA has to actually live at the local level. Mm-hmm. It's very hard for a corporate office to dictate what's going to happen in different markets that have different culture. So they have to allow freedom for those properties and those general managers and their food and beverage teams to be able to program what the local experience is. And it's almost counterintuitive for most brands to allow freedom because they're trying to get consistency. And when they're running a brand, the first thing they're trying to do is push down consistency, push down standards, push down, SOPs. And those SOPs and those standards could be the very well thing that kills the spirit that creates a lifestyle experience.
So I've talked to a number of hotel executives, and there's been a common thread, if you will. Pre-2008, post-2008. Pre-2008 was, the guest experience, almost the Walt Disney, if you will, methodology. And after that, of course, with the economic downturn, there was an intent, if you will, to tighten the purse strings and look at financials. Well, that really hasn't changed, even as the economy's gotten a little bit better. Why do you think hotels are still so hesitant to relinquish a little more of the purse strings, going back to the more experienced side, even with the economy doing better?
I think that depends on the ownership group, candidly. Independent lifestyle owners still are looking for that genuine experience, but you have to look at how the model's changed since 2008. There's a lot more of our profit going to third parties. If you look at the share that some of these OTAs are taking and what that does to the bottom line, there's just not as much to go around as it used to be. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that thought. I think it's brand specific and it's owner specific in terms of who's really going for the experience. Because I know at Two Roads with our brands, especially Thompson brand and Joie de Vie, JDV brands, it is all about the guest experience. We are driving that and we are spending money around that. So there is no continued tightening of the purse strings. Sure, every company experienced it in 2008, 2009, 2010, survival mode, if you will. But I think, especially around the lifestyle segment, you have to build in that experience or you're not going to be competitive. It's not enough to have a nice design.
Now, nowadays, of course, everyone's all about technology. I mean, goodness gracious, this thing here is ubiquitous among, everyone has one. And everyone's basically using their cell phones and tablets, and technology has just become, an incredible, if you will, tool. And we know that in every industry, hotels included, technology is taking a larger role. what is your honest assessment of where technology is going to go when it comes to hotels? Where do you see technology helping, and do you think it's in a sense hurt hotels at all?
I wouldn't say that it's hurt hotels. I think it's enhanced the experience for guests that want to take it. I think there's a different market for different types of experiences. There's people that prefer to check in at a kiosk, order their room service online, less interaction. A lot of the road warriors feel that way. They're dealing with people in their jobs all day, and they just don't need the extra stimulus from a face-to-face interaction with live people. But then when you talk about your transient travelers who are going to a city for the first time and trying to plan a special day, they want to have that face-to-face conversation. They want to feel like they're being taken care of. They're not dealing with people all day, So I think the market's going to continue to evolve in that regard, and there'll be people that will want one experience, and I think we'll be offering both experiences, and people will be able to have both.
Now, you actually have a unique background that not everyone has, but many strive for, which is you have opening hotel experience, which is a unique beast all by itself. What is the greatest reward, and then I guess we'll look at the flip side, the greatest challenge to opening new properties?
The biggest challenge, reward-wise, it's very satisfying. If you can, depending on what stage you get involved and what your level of involvement is, it's from conceptual stages, all the way to opening. It's akin to almost having a baby. Not quite as difficult, not quite as special, but it does feel like your baby when you see something on blueprints and you're involved in decisions during the architectural stages and the planning stages, and then you see that lobby come to life and you see that first guest coming through the door. I just got a chill telling the story. There's nothing like it. It's extremely satisfying, rewarding, a fantastic experience, and you learn a tremendous amount throughout the process. A tremendous amount. There's no learning experience within the hospitality industry that is more significant than opening a hotel.
So we talked about the positive. What challenges, because obviously it's an important part to it, and whether you overcome them will determine the success rate, of course. But what are some of the biggest challenges opening a new hotel is, especially in a market that may be saturated?
Well, that's a big question, because the biggest challenges operationally tend to be that you're dependent on third parties outside of things that are outside of your control, construction schedules, perhaps permitting, things of that nature. If you're not the actual developer, those things you have to be dependent on others. So delays that happen on construction projects are common and frequent, and make it a challenge to plan in time everything from your hiring to your PR launch, your marketing efforts. A lot of pieces of the puzzle there get within the delay. So I think that's one of the challenges.
So one of the unique benefits of opening a hotel, or of course of rebirthing a hotel or revisioning a hotel, is you get to create a new employer brand. You want a hotel where everyone wants to work. Of course, stay is important, but work is equally important. And that talks about employer brand. So how do you help build a good employer brand, especially for a new hotel?
Ultimately, it comes down to the people that you hire, that you fill the building with. And it has to be people that you want to work with. When I'm hiring and interviewing people, it's people that I like, people that I enjoy the dialogue with. Hire more for heart than I do resume, candidly, because you're going to spend every day with these individuals. And if you hire the right people, it's going to start and build the correct work environment, including especially your leaders. If you hire leaders that treat their team fairly and support their team and are enjoying being at work and create a fun environment, that fosters exactly what you're talking about. It fosters a brand where people want to go. And if you treat them with respect, even if things don't work out, and I had an old boss of mine that said, you want that person to be happy and engaged and in a good relationship with you up into the day, even when you hug them and you decide to part ways, whether it was their decision or your decision. It's a matter of treating people with respect and creating an environment that people can thrive in. I think this is, one of the hotels that I oversee is a great example of that. The turnover is extremely low. People don't want to leave. They want to stay there because it's a family and they enjoy coming to work. And if you can do that, that's the start.
Very valuable insight there. You said something kind of interesting in the beginning of that statement. You said you hire for heart as opposed to a resume in many cases, because you have to work with these people, which makes sense. But that begs a question, because there's a debate that's been going on, which is the significance of a college degree. We all know it's beneficial, there's no doubt. But in your opinion, is a college degree the most important tool? If someone walks into your organization and they necessarily don't have the degree, but they've got the drive, does that equal out in your opinion?
It does. In my mind, yes. When people ask me this, I tell them a college degree opens doors for you, but then the rest is up to you. You'll get your foot in the door easier with a college degree. But if I have two employees doing the exact same job, and one has a college degree and one doesn't, and one's doing a better job, it's irrelevant to me. The one who's doing the better job is going to be more successful, is going to be promoted. And I have plenty of people that are in a senior position that don't have a college degree, but have worked their way up and been successful in that regard.
Now, we try to help hoteliers across the board. And obviously you've had success with your employer brand. You talked about the one hotel that has very low turnover. Unfortunately, we know that turnover can be as much as 70% right now in the industry. And there are hotels that are suffering or struggling with a less than a desirable employer brand, if you will. What advice do you have for them? What's the first one or two steps they could take if they want to right the ship, if you will?
Well, if it's cultural and if it's deep within their brand or their employer brand, it's challenging because you have to find out why that is. And generally speaking, it's usually because the right people aren't being hired. We've all been in different environments. I've been in environments where I felt like my team didn't have my back necessarily, and I've been in environments where I knew like me and my team were both aiming for the same goal and where we would, support each other under all circumstances. And it wasn't a cutthroat competitive environment, although everybody was very driven. So you can create both. You can have both. You can hire really nice people that are really hard workers and really want to be successful. And if you can do that, that's where it starts. It starts with the work environment, and then you have to treat them fair. I'm a very business-minded person. I'm a very business-driven person. There are times where the best business decision is not the best people decision, and you have to balance that. And sometimes you're going to err, and you should say, I'm going to make the people decision here, even though maybe I can save a couple dollars by making the business decision. And that carries weight in the industry and amongst the people that might want to come and work for you.
Very invaluable advice, especially these are great takeaways that hoteliers can utilize right now. Now, the next question I affectionately refer to as, I call it the Barbara Walters question. The old, if you could be a tree, what kind of tree would you be? One of those questions. And it goes a little like this. Think back to the Scott who first started in the industry years ago and now. What is the one thing that you know now that you wish you would have known when you started?
Well, I can tell you, that's an interesting question. There's not something that, all right, I guess I would have planned a little bit more strategically in terms of what I ultimately wanted to do. I have been blessed because I accidentally fell into an industry that I adore and that I look forward to coming to work every day. And it's not something that most people can say. So, but my path, if you look at my resume, I kind of had a jagged line and had to sometimes take two steps back to make a step forward because I wasn't as strategic as I could have been. And when I talk to young professionals that are asking me this question, I say, and it's a 7 habits adage, but it starts with the end in mind. It's like, where do you want to be and why do you want to be there? What do you want your job to be like? What do you want your day-to-day be like? What's your expectations for salary, income? Define those things first. And then figure out what job embodies those characteristics that you've just defined, and then work your way backwards. How do I get there? Me, I was gung-ho to become a general manager as quickly as possible, and then I was gung-ho to become a regional as quickly as possible, and I didn't always think about what types of hotels I want to run, what brand, what experience do I want to deliver, and a couple times, or just one time really, I had to take a reset and put myself into the right brand so that I could do what I'm doing now, basically.
And I guess the last two questions I have before I wrap up, because we all look at our careers, and we always talk about the pluses and the successes. Speak, if you will, to what impact the mistakes have had in your life, whatever they may be, because I know you're going to have a a student right now. You're going to have a kid who's fresh out of college, or someone who's just starting in their career, and you know what? They're going to have ups and downs. And what did you take away from the downs, the mistakes that happened, that they can hold on to when they're going through their rough times?
I would say that, in addition to what I had just said about starting with the end in mind, that's something that I tell everybody as well. I would say, don't be afraid to be yourself at work. I would say earlier in my career, I'm a very type A personality, perfectionist, would always be looking for what I can fix and running around the hotel or the casino or whatnot. And that's not always the best approach, because the people you're working with could be alienated in that regard. And I think back to my younger management self, and I was definitely a little bit of a bull in a china shop. And as I've aged and matured and become more confident in myself, I'm now happy and free to be myself at work, so that they can see who I really am as a person. And I think that goes a long way in terms of loyalty and relationships. So you can be yourself. You still have to do your job. You still have to be professional. You still have to do all those things. But you don't have to be this textbook leader, manager that you would create in your pinstripe suit and project on a wall. You can be human, and you can let people see your humanity.
Being human, it's just be yourself, be confident in who you are. Terrific advice. Last question for you. Someone wants to do some research. Someone wants to grow in their career. Are there any publications, is there any resources that you yourself have turned to that you think others might benefit from?
Advice for someone who wants to grow in their career?
Yeah, and I guess when we look at it, are there resources? For example, is there a publication that you would read? Is there a certain resource? Is there something they should be looking into that you've utilized or you currently utilize that might help them either learn more about the industry or grow in their career?
Well, I would say the next step after what I said earlier in terms of defining what you like, and that includes, what kind of shifts do you think you're going to work? Are you okay with working nights, weekends, indefinitely or whatnot? Then you find people that are in that role. So if you decide, hey, I really want to be a regional vice president, then you find Scott Koster and you reach out to Scott Koster and you say, hey, could I sit down and have a cup of coffee with you sometime? I just like your brain in terms of how you got to where you are. Networking is what my advice would be. And you can do that through LinkedIn. You can do that through various career sites. You can do that through company websites. You can do that through your school resources. There's lots of ways to do that. But creating those networking opportunities and having those conversations with individuals who have successfully traversed what you want to do will certainly help you understand. And it's something that I wish I had done as a young professional.
So it sounds like mentorship is an important factor to growing in your career.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's critical.
Well, speaking of, you brought up at the beginning of that question, you said if you want to become a regional VP, reach out to Scott. Well, okay, as we wrap up today, how can people reach out to Scott? How can they get a hold of you?
I think LinkedIn's probably your best bet, and everybody's inundated with invites for LinkedIn, so maybe something more creative than the default LinkedIn approach might be helpful, or you can get me through when you go through the company website of Two Roads. You can find me as well. I'm happy to have conversations with people. I love helping people traverse the things and avoid the mistakes that I made in my career, so happy to help anybody. That's
great. So what we'll do, Scott, we're going to link your LinkedIn profile page, and we'll also put the Two Roads website on our website, which is yourhotelrecruiter.com. We'll actually list this under the podcast page. We'll actually list your contact information so people can get a hold of you.
Okay, that's fine.
I appreciate your time, Scott. Invaluable conversation. It's a lot of great takeaways for today. And I again appreciate you taking time out of your busy day.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. It was great speaking to you.
Have a great day.